the bike and walked up to Bruce's fence and started shooting. The man reportedly fired at least 8 shots before riding away on his motorcycle. Bruce, his wife, and 4-year-old son were home at the time and luckily escaped unharmed. Bruce believes, however, that the gunman was paid to shoot at his house. And in other news, a local singer, Dion D'Souza, reportedly died on Sunday while tuning his guitar for a performance at the annual Rupununi Rodeo celebrations in Latham, Region 9, his relatives stated in a Facebook post. D'Souza is an indigenous singer popularly known for his country-style singing. He had been performing his songs for years at the rodeo since his return from Venezuela a few years ago. He was scheduled to perform on Sunday night, but unfortunately, he died hours before his concert. D'Souza is originally from Maruca, Region 1, and has been singing since his youth. He had migrated to Venezuela and had even served as a captain of an indigenous Venezuelan village called San Flaviano. And that's the news at the moment. Thank you for listening.
Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM, 11 hours 5. It is time for a rebroadcast of last night's edition of Join the Oil Team and Have Your Say.
For what I'm sure will be a very enticing and educating discussion, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I must say, it's really good to be back joining the team, although Mr. Lal is not here this evening with us. Davina and I do have quite a few interesting topics to go through this evening. We're going to keep things short and sweet, but in the same spirit, we invite you to call and share your thoughts with us. Even if you don't have questions, just call in, share your perspectives, because as we've been saying, this is a conversation where every person's opinion matters, and we want to hear from you. So I'm happy to be part of tonight's program again, yes, continuing this discussion. Davina, I'll leave the floor open to you now for you to make your opening remarks.
Thank you, Kiana. I just wanted to say good evening again. Namaste. Welcome to our viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. Mr. Lal isn't here, but I send you greetings and I thank you for joining us tonight on his behalf. We plan to educate you guys on the audit tonight. What we plan to share with you are some of our findings. We have finally laid hands on this audit report, the preliminary audit report that has been released on the US $1.6 billion expenses from ExxonMobil between the cost that they incurred between the years 1999 to 2017. And so, Kiana, I know you have written quite a few articles based on your findings in that document. So without further ado, I think we should go straight into those findings and start discussing some of those issues that were highlighted in that audit.
Thanks, Davina. One of the things I love about covering the oil and gas industry, you never know what you're going to be handed the following week.
Yes.
At one point, the focus was, and it continues to be, on, the flaws, some of the fatal flaws within the 2016 Stabroek Block Production Sharing Agreement. And what we're examining now as journalists in the field are some of the findings, the preliminary findings in an audit that focuses on $1.6 billion in costs. Now, before we get into that, I wish to lay the groundwork on, who are really the players involved in this audit. Now, in November 2019, we had a British firm that was hired. That company is called IHS Markit Upstream. And it's a very well-known company in the oil and gas industry, not just for auditing, but for a number of other services. It provides analytical research. It's also known for putting together a very important forum called Sarah Week, which is like the Super Bowl of oil conferences. and that takes place in Houston. So they're responsible for that. And as many of you can probably recall, the vice president, Dr. Barajagdio, was one of the speakers at that event. So IHS is a company that's been in the market, and it's well known to the oil and gas players. So we hired this company, Guyana, in 2019 to examine 18 years of expenses. And in those in that work that they were hired to do, we also have another layer of protection, and that layer of protection includes a team of technical officers from the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Guyana Revenue Authority, and we also have some help from the International Monetary Fund. So that team is responsible for going through the findings uncovered by IHS, and they would ensure that, everything possible that, they're supposed to do to protect our interests, that's been done. No effort has been spared. And on that note, Davina, while there is an audit report that we have our hands on, where we are able to see some of the findings uncovered by this company, this British company, we also have been able to access an internal document from the Guyana Revenue Authority, which shows the extent to which our people have been protecting our interests. We are able to get a front row seat as to what are some of the deficiencies our people have been highlighting, they've been finding in this audit report. And one of the stories that we did on this front examines the fact that the Guyana Revenue Authority has been able to flag 40 million US in expenses by ExxonMobil and its partners, and the fact that there was no transparency where these expenses are concerned. And the British auditor, based on the story that we've done, the British auditor simply said, hey, well, ExxonMobil has billed Guyana for X, Y, and Z, totaling 40 million US. It is completely covered under the agreement. There's no need for us to, be concerned about that because the PSC covers it. GRA and the technical officers of the Ministry of Natural Resources have said, hey, have you checked to see who exactly these materials are being purchased from? Are there related companies?
Correct.
Did you go as far as to probing to see what the original receipts are? Mm-hmm. Is it in keeping with market prices? Mm-hmm. So thankfully, we have that layer of protection that is there to ensure we're not just rubber stamping what this British auditor is providing us. Another interesting finding, Davina.
Kiana, just before you move on, if I may, I just wanted to jump in here on one of the articles that I actually covered. Mm-hmm. The same audit report, it flagged that $240 million in contracts were sole sourced, meaning that there was no sort of tendering process for the contracts that they awarded. You just went ahead and selected specific contractors and decided, I'm going to give you this and I'm going to give you that. So the auditor flagged this, and I just wanted to read a part from you from the report. It says, of the single source procurement awards, EPGL, which is the operator of the Stabroek Block and ExxonMobil's subsidiary, it failed to demonstrate the competitiveness of the rates within the contract. So this was of that amount of the contracts that they awarded, they said 28 million of this should be removed from the cost bank as they fail to show competitiveness. So this was just relating to part of what you just told the listeners. So just to enlighten you guys, $28 million in contracts, they failed to show how competitive these were. And as Mr. Lal would say, this, guys, I need you to remember and bear in mind that these are our resources, and just think about what this amount of money could be doing for you and your families. Just
Excellent
today,
point.
today, I heard him mentioning downstairs that there was a man on the street that was asking him for $1,000 or something like that to get something to eat, and he was saying to us, it hurts him to know that we have so much wealth and it's not trickling down to our people. And here we have these multinational corporations like ExxonMobil swimming in our resources, literally. And this audit report, it's just US 1.6 billion. Just think about what might happen, what might be some of the findings coming out of the audit between 2018 and 2020. That is to the tune of $7.3 billion. So I just wanted you guys to think about that. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Kiana.
No, Davina, I'm happy that you raised that, because just on those 2 points, you have millions, multi-million-dollar contracts being sole sourced.
Right.
And then you have the issue with the GRA and the Natural Resources Ministry team having to flag this British auditor to say, hey, there's $40 million that was recovered and we don't have any transparency where this spending is. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. This preliminary report is not finished. Just keep that in mind.
Yes.
They're still going through the process of dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. So we don't know if much more will be uncovered.
Yeah.
But it is mind-boggling, Davina, that we are seeing this type of this pattern of unsound financial practices with 1.6 billion.
Yes.
And we have an ongoing audit of $7.3 billion.
Correct.
And this audit, and I don't want to go into all the different things that we have uncovered from this audit report tonight, because there's so many other topics that we would like to touch on. But Davina, this report, the manner in which we go about it, the approach that we take, it is going to be critical in the precedent that we set. And what I am more interested in seeing is the action government is prepared to take to ensure that ExxonMobil and its partners or subcontractors know without a shadow of a doubt that Guyana will not sit idly by and allow unsound financial practices to take place without any type of repercussion.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that as well.
That is going to be the breaking point.
Yeah.
Because Exxon, and Davina, you have a very interesting point that you raised in the newspapers with your reportage on this matter, on how we're sort of tied up in terms of the legal action that we can take. And I know the vice president has a press conference tomorrow, and one of the critical questions that I think he needs to address is how we are going to go about addressing questionable costs that arise
Correct.
in these audits. And Davina, I'd love to invite you now to just share with our audience what the contract says about the process we can take for this.
All right, so it's quite a mouthful. So I'm going to ask you guys to give me your attention for a bit. So I was going through, given that we have finally put hands on this report and so on, and we have finally been able to go through some of these findings from our first audit report, I decided to delve into our production sharing agreement that we signed on to with ExxonMobil, and specifically to look at what it says about the audits and its findings. And, because I myself, not just as a journalist, but as a citizen of Guyana, I wanted to know, what is the process? How do we go about recovering these monies that are indeed, that may be, what might be the correct term, that are not appropriate, or, that should not even be there in the first place, that it might be inflated cost, whatever it is. So from my research, reading through that contract, what I found is that the contract is saying to us clearly, if it is that if our audit finds that costs are there that should not be, Exxon is still going to be allowed to recover those costs. So until Guyana is able to prove to them and to explain, why those costs should not be there, they are going to take our money out, and we have to go through a long process of arbitration to be able to reclaim our money. So I after raising that story, publishing it in the newspaper.
But Davina, before you go on, because I know you want to raise the other fresh point, and as Mr. Lal would love to see, let's break it down a bit. If what Davina said just now didn't hit home, try to imagine somebody rob you, or your child, or your family member. 50% of what's in your bank account. And they tell you the only way you could get back this money is if you go to court
and prove
that they actually rob you.
Right. So Exxon has to agree to.
Yes.
Exxon has to agree to say, well, I can give you back your money, and if they say no, then we have to fight them to get that money back.
And you have to pay their lawyers in the process.
Correct. So what the contract says is that we have to go to arbitration. And so in the arbitration process, we would have to pay all the fees that is associated with not just our side of it, but their side of it, all the arbitrators and so on. We would have to stand those costs for the facilities, wherever these people use. However, if they decide to rent a hotel to stay at, all of those costs we are saddled with. And so I really wanted to point that out, and so that was carried in our newspaper today. There's another aspect of it that we plan to highlight tomorrow. Let me just share with you just a little part of that. I was speaking to a specialist from Trinidad and Tobago. You guys may be familiar with him by now. His name is Anthony Paul. He, after going through this, I thought, man, let me try to understand if this is what happens around the world, if this is an industry practice for these companies to just say, man, this is my money and I can just take it out. I spend this money, I can just take it out back. So I was speaking with Mr. Anthony Paul, and he said to me, Davina, this is ridiculous. He said, there is nowhere in this world are companies allowed to do something like this. They simply cannot get away with something like this. He said the normal practice, and this should be common sense, I'm thinking, if there are costs in dispute, then those costs are put on hold. Now, Kian and I, if we have a problem concerning this cost, you can't take this money, Kiana, without us reaching a settlement. So what happens presently is that you can go away with this cost, and after the settlement, if the arbitrators say you need to pay me back, then you will pay me back with some amount of interest. But he's saying, no, this is not so. What has to happen is that those costs stay there, and until we reach a settlement, then is when you get your money or whatever. He also stressed the point that oil companies, what they do, this is a strategic move. So this contract, it says that we have to go to an international body to deal with this arbitration process. He's saying that this is what they love to do because they're fully aware that countries like ours, we're still in the development process. We are unable to finance this thing. And so that is why these companies push for this international arbitration process, because it's so costly that countries may back off and say, man, I just can't deal with this. Let me just leave them. So he's saying what happens, and specifically in Trinidad and Tobago, what they do is the minister is the final arbiter. So he decides if the costs should be awarded to the company or not. And so in Guyana, we have given up that right. The government has said to Exxon, I don't want any immunity. So you have the power to just appoint these arbitrators, basically. So that is where we are presently. And the man is saying to us, this is just one of the ways in which, one of the flaws, basically, in our PSA, that existing agreement.
Davina, when I think of the full picture of what you say, I am hearing you saying to me that this generation and the future generation will have to accept being robbed. And if we want to contest the costs that were taken, the revenues that have been taken from us, then we have to go to court.
And pay for it.
We will not only pay for our lawyers to fight our case, we will pay for the lawyers of the companies that robbed us.
Correct.
And as you had pointed out in your story, this process could take a year.
Exactly. It can take up to a year.
In the meantime, they get to hold on to this money,
right,
and reinvest it.
Yes. While Guyana gets nothing.
I mean, I don't understand how we can continue to accept that this must be the faith for this current generation as well as the future. I don't understand how we can accept this. And what makes the situation even more frightening, Davina, is the type of auditor that we have. If we have our local auditors who, and this is not to knock anyone or anything of the sort, this sector is new to us. Everyone knows that. So we have our people who, with their own experience, they're able to see some of the things that are slipping through the cracks. And we have millions of dollars slipping through the cracks with this British firm.
Right.
Then it makes you wonder, where is Guyana? What are we doing? And one of the frightening things for me, Davina, is not one, how government is going to address questionable costs, the type of action they will take. And secondly, we have 2 audits, one for 7.3 billion and another one for 1.6. How are we taking the learnings and recommendations from this audit and incorporating it into another audit? And let's not forget, we still have the costs for Payara to start auditing.
I was actually going to say that just now, that is, while you were talking about your concerns and so on, what worries me is the rate at which we're going at, because government has said clearly, and you reported on this, Mr. Jagdeo saying recently, we have no apologies to give for saying that we are going to ramp up our production activities offshore.
Right.
So it's like we have been struggling to keep up with the sector as is, you know. And so how are we going to manage with more? How are we auditing to ensure that we are not being robbed? I mean, this is conducting audits is just one way of ensuring that you get value for your resources. I mean, our contract is already so lopsided, right? We know that our benefits are so meager. You know, and I won't even get into that because Mr. Lal usually stresses it, right? And so we know how little we're actually gaining from our contract. And so the least that we can do, I think, is to take these audits seriously. And if we aren't going to do that, Kiana, I'm not sure what we will ever get from our resources. You know, as more and more projects come on stream, it's important to know that we keep spending more. So it's not just about, oh, we don't want to see growth. We don't want to see the sector grow. What we have been saying at Kaieteur News is that there needs to be a proper management system in place. So as much as you're saying, okay, I'm ramping up production, there must be equal effort to regulate and manage the sector.
Absolutely.
We cannot just be racing ahead with production activities and we're literally crawling. You know, when it comes to putting systems in place to manage the sector. So that is my personal take on it.
I got you loud and clear, Davina. And you know, I really didn't want us to go too much into some of these findings because I think we would need, oh goodness, it would need so much more time than what we have planned for tonight. But there's just one other finding that I think it's pertinent for us to just discuss a bit, and that has to do with the findings on insurance. Now, one of the things the auditors found, and just to remind that this audit is from 1999 to 2017. So during that time, the auditors found that there was no evidence that Hess Corporation or CNOC had proper insurance provision coverage in place.
Wow.
No evidence was provided. Despite several requests for this to be made available for the auditors to scrutinize. Now, the only information that the auditors said they received was from ExxonMobil's affiliate company, Esso Exploration and Production Guyana Limited, EEPGL. Now, EEPGL and their documentation said, okay, yes, we have insurance coverage in place. But when the auditors checked it, they found that this company is wholly owned by the parent company for EEPGL, which is ExxonMobil. And that's all we have in place.
Wow.
An insurance policy from a company that ExxonMobil owns.
Yes.
And I don't know how we can still be comfortable with that, because let me let the listeners know, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has said that, you know, it's in receipt of a $600 million per occurrence insurance coverage. Now, we have no idea who this coverage was provided by, and we also don't know if this coverage was provided for by Hess Corporation and CNOC. We don't know if they have satisfied, because the majority of the time the question has been premised on just checking on the operator of the block. But the auditors have also pointed out that, hey, Hess and CNOC have not been in compliance with this provision, with no consequence. With no consequence for non-compliance.
Wow.
That is the standard that remains in the industry, because up until this point, we have still to secure full liability coverage for the Stabro block
Kiana,
up to this point.
I know you said you didn't want us to spend too much time
Yes.
describing this audit, the findings from the audit, but there's, as you were speaking, this story that you also reported on. I think it's very important to note, even as you're speaking about Hess and CNOC, they have submitted some costs even before they became a signatory to the PSA. Isn't that so?
Oh dear, yes.
So I will allow you to explain, because I'm thinking it's just running through my brain, the fact that they have refused to give us any type of insurance while operating between this period. However, they don't want to. They want to claim cost at the same time. So how do we justify? And I'm gonna pass it over to you now.
Davina, I think, and thank you so much for reminding me about that, but that was one of the most disrespectful, insulting, egregious, disgusting findings in that report.
Mm-hmm.
How could you have the audacity to charge me? You were nowhere near Guyana. As the Minister of Natural Resources love to say, you never stepped foot on this country. And you have a set of bills that you already have laid out for me toward to 1 million US.
Yep.
You ain't do nothing in this block. 31 million US. You ready for me to pay, but you can't give me
Any documents to show
documentation
how you spent this money
to ensure that, okay, I can see what it is spent on and what is even a slap in the face. Davina, you you did everything possible to ensure that you recover this $31 million in expenses that you racked up before you become a party to the Stabro Block PSA. But yet, you don't want to spend.
Exactly.
You don't want to put in the investment to ensure that I have full coverage
Yes.
for any type of environmental disaster or damage that your operations
Yes.
cause on our basin. It's unthinkable. And it just goes to show that we need to be so vigilant when it comes to these oil companies, because they don't care. They have no interest in ensuring that our interest is protected. The only thing they care about is their shareholders.
Correct. And like you were saying, Kiana, it just shows how disrespectful they are. And I think our government is very laid back on this matter as well. It's like we carried a story recently as well with them shifting this responsibility of full liability coverage now to the EPA. And Mr. Christopher Ram, he's an attorney at law, he has said that this is absolutely ridiculous. This matter of full liability coverage has to be dealt with by the government. How do you now shift such a major responsibility over to the EPA? You have to, as the government, stamp your authority and say, hey, we want you to secure these operations. Don't just shift this over to a little agency like the EPA. We need to get full coverage liability for your operations. So, like I said, I think our government is really taking a laid back approach. I don't think that they're taking this thing seriously. At the last presidential press conference, Kiana even raised it with the president. I said, Mr. President, an oil spill can have far-reaching impacts, and as a matter of fact, it can affect as many as 14 Caribbean islands. And this is not what I am saying. This is based on the ExxonMobil EIA submitted so far. His response to me, and perhaps I can get Mr. Lal to share that tape with you guys at another program. He was saying, we can't look at the bad examples. Let us focus on those good examples that are out there. Trinidad has operated for over 100 years, and we have never seen a citizen, trying to show the negativity and what can and cannot happen. We need to focus on what can happen. Davina shows some success stories as to how oil helped to develop other countries. There's so many out there. And so I think Ghana is moving so rapidly. We are pushing past industry standards. And again, this is not Kaieteur News saying this, or Kiana Wilberg saying this, and Davina Baggett saying this. This is what Exxon has said itself to us, that they have moved at such a pace that they have never even done before. And Guyana, like I said earlier in my remarks, as much as we are pushing ahead with our production activities, we need to see equal effort in regulating and monitoring our sector. We can't just be ramping up production activities and we're not taking proper safeguards. We need to make sure that these protections are in place. And something as simple as a signed parent company guarantee. If Exxon is so confident that its operations are safe, I see no reason why they can't sign a document to say we are going to take responsibility to cover any damages that this insurance cannot cover. They have been saying endlessly, our operations are safe. We're taking all these precautions. We're doing this and we're doing that. So why are you then so insecure, and why are you reluctant to give us that signed parent company guarantee?
Davina, the point you raised, it is disheartening that our leaders would take the position of saying, let's not look at those who got it wrong. Let's look only at those who got it right. The ones who got it right did so because they looked at the ones who got it wrong. Mm-hmm. That is how they were able to set themselves apart.
Correct.
Trinidad and Tobago, and Davina, you were there with me. Mr. Lal was there. We have spoken to so many stakeholders from Trinidad, and they all say, listen, there is so much you can learn from us because of how many mistakes we've made in this industry. Mm-hmm. The IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, every time they give us a loan, they always outline the situation. They give you a situational report of the country, and they explain why they are providing this report, why they're providing this loan, beg your pardon. And in each situational report, Davina, both financial institutions always impress upon Guyana how easy it is to move from being touted as the fastest growing economy in the world to being right on par with those who got it wrong. Mm-hmm. Almost every situational report. I know it's but just for safety's sake, almost every situational report. Mm-hmm. And why do they tell us about how easy it is to get it wrong with this industry? Because those who got it wrong, that club, that group of countries that got it wrong, it by far 1,000 times, it eclipses those who got it right in the industry. And it's only a handful. It is only a handful. And the majority of the countries that got it right, they didn't get it right just because they are smarter than us in terms of being the world's best legislators. It's not because, they had some sophisticated, otherworldly technology that we just don't have any access to. No, it came down to one thing: political will.
Yeah.
That is what it took. Those countries were not afraid to look at those who got it wrong, and you need to look at those who got it wrong, because at this juncture of our history, oil and gas already accounts the oil industry, and we only have 2 ships in operation, and oil accounts for more than 50%
Correct.
of the economy, and we have about four ships already
approved.
sanctioned,
Yeah.
with the 5th already underway, and discussions are already for the 6th. Line of sight already for the 7th. And we're not supposed to talk about how to safeguard this country that will be led, the economy will be dominated by oil and gas. And we're not supposed to talk about the vulnerabilities. We're not supposed to talk about the risk.
Right.
We're not supposed to ensure we don't become complacent. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I would not stand for that.
And it's important to note the types of devastating impacts that can be had from an event such as an oil spill.
Yep.
Because it's not like, let's say, sugar, where if we have some sort of a flood, there are impacts, yes, but to a point whereby it can wipe out so much of your country's growth. You see, when we have an oil spill, it can be so devastating that it would not only impact our growth, but it could also have impacts on other Caribbean territories.
Absolutely.
So that is why we have been trying to get not only our government, but we have been even pressing Exxon at these press conferences that they have, to give us full liability coverage. So like you said, Kiana, it all comes down to political will. And so I recall recently, sometime last year, the opposition went to Parliament and they...
Oh, goodness, the opposition. Continue. That's a whole disappointing, but anyway, Davina, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yes. So they went to Parliament and they decided to file this motion to try to press the government to get full liability coverage out of ExxonMobil. Now, that motion was thrown out by the government, and it was discussed widely before. They threw out that motion. They said, hey, man, we just can't do this. It's not feasible. We're going to drive away investment. All sorts of things they came up with. Those MPs came up with. So Mr. David Patterson, he's the Shadow Natural Resources Minister. He was the one that filed that motion. And he said, look, at a press conference, a later press conference, they may have thrown out this thing, but we in the opposition are going to keep pressing to ensure we will not give up on full liability coverage. Now, since then, we haven't seen or heard anything from the opposition as it regards to the call for full liability coverage. In fact, I have seen that there's a woman's led group, Red Shred, that they have taken on this role now of protesting the office of the president at least once monthly to say to him, sir, we would like to see full liability coverage in place because this burden for our cleanup, our livelihoods, all sorts of things can be impacted by an oil spill. So we don't want to bear this burden. We want you to take this step now to ensure that Exxon gives us this coverage. So we have seen that group protesting at least once monthly for the parent company guarantee to be in place. I have reached out to the opposition and hopefully they give me a response soon as to what is next, because we as journalists too, Kiana, we have to ensure that we not just let them slip by. They are elected. They are our representatives in Parliament, and so we need to hold them to the fire, ensure that they are moving and pressing on our behalf, not just talking about the small matters. We need to ensure that these people are addressing our $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion sector. So I have reached out to them. Hopefully they give me a response soon as to what is next on this matter.
Davina, On the political opposition, and I'm glad that you raised that because at Kaieteur News, we believe everyone needs to be placed under the microscope. Not
Correct.
just the government. It's
Yes.
not just the
Yes.
government that has to be held accountable for their action or inaction,
Correct.
but the political opposition as well. And every week, you see these statements about racism, and you see these statements about all types of issues, and there is hardly any focus. Hardly, and let me just paraphrase that, hardly any independent focus from the opposition. And when I say independent, I mean not what they read from Kaieteur News from Stabrook News. There is hardly any independent analysis, substance, or research, or any policy position as regards the oil and gas industry. Yes, you table questions in Parliament, you utilize that route, fine, no problem. But the advocacy cannot stop there.
Exactly.
Davina, you mentioned that there's the Retroid group. They're doing their bit to protest and to contribute to the fight for a fair change and for a better environment, a better regulatory and legislative environment. But what are we seeing from the political opposition? And I just want to give two examples. The AFC leader, Kemraj Ramjatan, last week spoke about the audit that was first published and released by Stabrook News. Subsequent to that, he released the report for the media. Up until this point, we don't know what are the main findings of the AFC or its partner, APNU, as it pertains to this report. Not a single statement about findings that it has been able to uncover
Yes.
from reading this report and what it finds alarming. But we've had a statement from Ramjatan speaking about what was reported on in Stabrook News.
Like you said, no independent findings.
Then, and that's just the audit report. The government released in February the draft documents for the model PSA for deep water and shallow water. Up until this point, we don't know what the opposition agrees or doesn't agree with in this document. They were asked, I recall asking the AFC, what is your take on the documents? And they couldn't provide an answer. It's the same thing with the APNU.
Correct. Kiana, if I may, last week's press conference, I think you asked the question about the
Yes.
PSA to AFC. So the week before, one of the executive members, I had joined their press conference. Dr. Vincent Adams, he was sharing some of his concerns about the PSA. They were related to the cost recovery of insurance, the fact that it can be recovered and so on. I don't want to get in much to it because I had to actually point out to him that there is a clause in the PSA that says Guyana will not be on the hook for any sort of costs associated with the spill and so on. So I don't want to get too much into that. But as it regards the APNU faction, at their last press conference, I raised the question. I said, are you ready to share some of your concerns, or what are your comments on this PSA? I mean, the 2 weeks period has elapsed. So they said at the appropriate time they're going to release those findings to us. I'm not sure when that might be, but that is all we got from them. At the appropriate time, they are going to share those concerns with us. Yes.
If that is not the definition of lazy, and I'll I'll leave it at that. And when people, the opposition cannot fault anyone for thinking that it is just asleep at the wheel and singing one tired tune over and over about racism and elections and different issues. We need to get down to the policy issues.
Yes.
Elections is around the corner. And we're seeing that every single week we hear these statements, but we don't know what are the policy positions. We don't know that. We don't see the in-depth analysis. Up to this point, nobody knows what the APNU or the AFC would do if they're elected tomorrow. What would they do to strengthen the legislative and regulatory framework or mechanisms for the oil and gas industry? What would they do to turn around the industry and maximize value? Nobody knows. That's a mystery. So the opposition clearly needs to step up its game. Yes, it is using the parliamentary avenue to ask questions. It is making efforts to pursue answers via various committees. But the the advocacy needs to be better. The media is by far, sometimes I wonder if there is even an opposition, or if we just have people with different views in two different political parties, and they hold press conferences when they become, because this is not a government in waiting.
It's sad, as Mr. Lal would say, we're in trouble.
Yes, and it's very frightening. It's quite troubling. And just to go back to some of the issues that we've raised, Davina, there's so many issues that we still need clarity on, especially where government is concerned. One of the things that we have called for and we have yet to see is a beneficial ownership register for those individuals who are behind these oil blocks. Who are the true owners, the true beneficiaries of the mining the mining industry? Who are the people, who are the players involved there? We don't know, and we've been asking for this for quite some time.
I think this is particularly important at this point in our country, even as we are in this phase of auctioning more of our oil blocks. And so I think this is the opportune time for us to have this register in place, because here we are about to award 14 of our oil blocks again, and we have no clue who it's going to. The beneficial owners, as you said. So these are things that must be in place. These are things that we have to keep pressing them to ensure that, that we have these transparency measures implemented. Josh, I believe that we're nearing the hour time. We've been rambling for quite some time, and so I would like to open the phone lines if we have callers that are eager to come through with their questions, with their comments. Kiana, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
Oh, no, not at all. Yes, Joshua, if we have anyone who's on the line or what's not, if not, we would go ahead and...
Well, let me just give them the numbers just in case they might have forgot. 226-745-324. Ms. Lal's not here tonight, so you can call us on those two numbers, or 622-2222. 226-745-324 or 622-2222. Go ahead, and as soon as the call comes through, I will let you know.
Thanks, Josh.
No
Davina, one of the important roles that I see the media playing is ensuring that this oil and gas industry has a very significant light of transparency. And I am pleased with the effort that we're seeing from Stabrook News and ourselves, and I'm hoping that we see more media houses coming on board, being more curious and providing more investigative analysis on the oil and gas industry. Joshua, we have a caller.
First caller?
Yes, first caller. Caller, good evening and welcome.
Yes. Good night to you all of you guys.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. These girls are doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
I wish it Mr. Glenn could, lady girls, be more regular on this program.
Thank you,
These
sir.
guys, these girls, them talking the truth, nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you for
I
your
love
comments,
these girls,
sir.
I heard them look from the time these girls them start, I left this region got nowhere. I just listen to this program. I listen to this program every single time Mr. Glenn is on the radio. I just always listen and share it amongst my friends.
Nice.
Everybody that will listen.
Wonderful, wonderful, sir. Thank you. And
Okay, yeah,
and
just
make
keep
sure
up
you
the
tell them to
good work.
call in too.
And hopefully next week or the other program I heard from these girls.
All right.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you so much to that caller. We appreciate the support and the fact that you're sharing the program, the links to the program with your friends, and we encourage other members of the audience to do the same. This is a discussion where, we need the input from every person.
Right.
There's no wrong or right opinion. We are here to listen and to share, different perspectives.
Caller, good evening and welcome.
Good night.
Good night.
Good evening.
Can you come out? I couldn't hear no. I just need to ask a few questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm listening to the show all the time.
Uh-huh.
Now, my concern is Mr. Lal and the work that he's doing. Now, Mr. Lal is a reporter, right?
Correct.
And I want to know if he's getting into politics.
If he is,
If he's
Want
getting
to
into
get
politics.
politics.
If he's getting into politics.
Uh-huh.
Because the reports that we're getting, fine, all is well. But it's not just, the thing is not just getting them to do what he wants them to do. If he's getting into politics, remember we have persons that want to follow him. As I mentioned a couple of nights ago, we should have groups. Okay, you're mentioning the red dress, the
Red thread.
group.
Uh-huh.
Right, we're mentioning that group. Now, if he gets other groups involved, it's a force to fight them. My thing is, I mentioned the group and he asked why groups. No, if he just, if he just wants people to listen to him and not get
did we lose a caller?
involved with him, he has to fall group. So that we can be a force, and not just like it's a vendor between himself and Javio, getting Javio to do what he wants to do. No, we don't want that alone. We want to fight him otherwise. We want to fight the people the other way.
I think
I think so, and I'll allow him to respond to you on Friday. We'll hear from
I'm
him.
glad that he's that I got through,
Uh-huh.
and I want to know if he's getting into politics or not, because it's no use, persons are asking him if he wants to play, telling them no, man, the other, no, I'm in it, okay?
He will respond to you on Friday.
If he wants persons to get involved, that knows about politics, he has to come out and say, what's his intention then? That's what I want to know.
All
What's
right.
his intention? Where would
All right, we probably lost him. They probably credit finish. But sir, if you're listening, you will hear from himself on Friday. We will answer for him.
okay.
All right. Well, while the caller did direct the question to
Yeah.
Mr. Lal, I wish to say this, and this is based on what Mr. Lal has also communicated to us.
Yeah.
The message at Kaieteur News, the effort of what we're doing, it's a collective effort
Yeah.
that seeks to enlighten Guyanese about your rights and to understand what you deserve.
Yes.
And that is at the crux of what we try to do here. That is at the heart and soul, that purpose, that sense of purpose, that drive to inform Guyanese that, hey, you hold the power to improve your future. It is up to you to get up and stand up for Guyana, to fight for what you believe in, to lend your voice to the cause. So, yes, Mr. Lal is going to elaborate on that, but it's just for you to understand that there is no political motivation
Yes.
behind what Kaieteur News is doing here. Our focus is to ensure that you, the citizens, you are armed with
Knowledge.
the relevant information that you need about this sector to ask the right questions of your leaders and to demand that the actions, the right things are being done to secure not just your future, not just the future to ensure your livelihood is better today, but to ensure that there's a better tomorrow. The future
children.
generation is set. So please, if you think that there is, if you have any wonder or question about whether there's any political motivation behind what Kaieteur News is doing, please get it out of your minds. That is not what we are here to do.